So, stage two, the complexion of the group changed a little bit. One student had a family emergency, so she couldn't return. And that was one of the requirements I had asked the parents that if they attended Monday's session, they also attended Wednesdays. And however, she had a family emergency, and I was able to get two additional students to come in her absence, but these students were not present for stage one. So stage two, we had five. I had five students, five research subjects, and three of which had just finished second grade with me as their self-contained homeroom teacher, and the fourth was my son, and he had also just finished second grade, but not with me, with another teacher on my team. And then a student who had just finished third grade. And so this was the complexion of our group in stage two. Instead of starting with literature and text that I had curated and kind of embedded in the classroom environment, I started with computers. I helped them log into Discovery Education, and they were familiar with Discovery Ed. But I wanted to see if, instead of me taking the time to frame the lesson and to curate the text, the literature, the content, if they were the curators. So if they go in to technology and they read and lift and find their own, will that make for a better start, and is that a better approach? So what I found was it actually wasn't. And I think for a couple of reasons, as I've reflected on it, they went in, they had to share a computer with a partner because we're at the library and most of the computers were occupied. So we had two computers going. One was with me at the 3D printer, and then we rotated. But the facts that they lifted were really vague. And when you compare side by side the facts from stage one and stage two, you see a decline in the quality of the information and the new learning. So that was interesting, and that's another thing to explore. But from there, the librarian offered to give us a demonstration on the 3D printer. And the 3D printer takes a really long time to print. So he and I had pre-selected before the students arrived. I came earlier, set everything up, and we had pre-selected phases of the moon object to print. And so that was already in motion. But he agreed to explain to the students how you select the images, how it transfers to the printer, and then how the printer actually creates an artifact, what is happening, how the plastic is melting slowly, and the computer is communicating to the printer what to print and how many movements and all of that. They were fascinated. The engagement was so high, it's like I almost had to pull them off the printer to go back to the classroom. So, but I did, and they brought their facts with them. We returned to the classroom, which is the same classroom we had for stage one. And we brought our facts to the circle, just like we did in stage one, and shared our facts with the group. That group discussion there was a decline in the higher order thinking and the real world connections. It just kind of fell flat. So from there, I gave the students the option of finishing the artifact that they started on Monday, or starting something new and making anything they want. So for the two new students that came, the objective had changed, because in stage one, the objective was to make an artifact that reflects the new information you learned today, whatever was interesting or whatever. And this time, the objective was, here's the space, make whatever you want without any requirement to reflect the moon. And so the two new students, I gave them a tour of the mediums available. They also chose art clay, both of them. So in this research group, it was unanimous. All of the students chose the clay. They both made spears, and the third grade student, her artifact represented what she had just learned, and it was very good. And his artifact represented a bowling ball because that was his favorite sport. So that was interesting. And so at the conclusion of this, they painted through the process. Those who had already made their artifacts, they painted them and finished them and added additional details, all of which reflected the facts that they had learned from each other and from the text, and even a couple things they had learned from the video that they selected to watch on Discovery Education. And what I found in this process was I did very little teaching. Had I spent more time curating maybe the videos on Discovery Ed or new text for stage 2, I think the learning could have gone deeper. And so that was one of the conclusions that I drew, is that a valuable use of my time would be spent framing the lesson and really curating the literature and the text so that they are teaching themselves and teaching each other. And then when they're making the artifact, it really is, they're assimilating what they just learned. And so I'm a facilitator more than an instructor. And that's the piece that I took away from this. And as the students explained their artifacts, they explained the position of the sun in relation to the moon and how that influences the phases, and if it's a half moon, a crescent, a waxing gibbous, all of the things. And they talked about how the moon was lighter on this side because it was facing the sun versus this side. And they talked about the fact that there is no air on the moon. That was an interesting moment where they explained the footprint. I said, how could a footprint still be intact on the moon today? I mean, that was so many years ago. That was, my gosh, 50 years ago. How is it still there? That's not possible. Or, is it possible? How is that? And they said, well, there's no air. And I said, well, what does no air have to do with the footprint? Well, there's no breeze to blow the footprint away. And so it was so cool to see them integrate their prior knowledge with the new knowledge and talk to each other about that and actually incorporate that into their artifacts.